What's up, everybody? I'm David Van Dyke. This is Polyrhythm Music LLC. Bang. This week we're going to do something I've never done before, which is a reaction video. And I'm doing it because Rick Beato put a video out 2 weeks ago that made a bunch of people very, very, very upset.
Hey everybody, I'm Rick Beato. We're going to try something new today. This video is on the history of the music business and technology in 2 acts.
And I've learned that when somebody puts out their opinion and it makes this many people mad, it's usually because either A, they're ridiculously off base on what they say, and people just can't get their head around how could you be so stupid, or B, they are right. And Rick, I don't know Rick. Disclosure now, I don't know Rick at all. I've never spoken to him. I've never met him. I don't know, I've never taken his classes. I do watch some videos on his channel, not all. I think his channel's hilarious at times. When he does when he gets excited about something, when he's doing a song review or something. And he does the they start here and they end here. That's all they're doing. It's just here to here. And they play 128th notes and they slide 17 times and then they get here all in half a second. It's brilliant. That cracks me up because it's like, Rick, not everybody can do that. That's why it's amazing. So I think he's a very informed human being. I think he has some relatively on point views. I don't find myself disagreeing with him very often. So I wanted to jump into this video.
Music is too easy to make. What do I mean by music is too easy to make? Let's just go back to the 1940s and 50s. Frank Sinatra used to get up in front of an orchestra and sing a vocal take, and they had one microphone. And they would get it balanced just right. Frank would say, okay, I'm ready to do it, and he'd sing it.
Come fly with me, let's float down to Peru.
Then you get into the 1960s or so, and then you have things where you have multi-track machines. You could go in if you had a mistake in a vocal part or any instrument, and you do a punch-in. Oh, I don't like that word. I sang it out of tune, or I want to change this lyric. You go in and you just punch in, fix the line, punch out. Fast forward to 1998 with Cher, the Believe song. They invented this thing, auto-tune. I've talked about this a million times on here, but auto-tune was a plug-in that would go into these DAWs, digital audio workstations. So you'd have something like Pro Tools or Logic or Ableton. What you do is you take the vocal, let's say the song's in C major. Any note in the key of C major, it would tune the note to. Well, T-Pain and people like that realized if you put it on a really hard tuning, it would make it sound like a keyboard. And that's what they did in the Believe song. Well, then the same thing starts happening with drum parts. Guys playing a drum part and you're like, you know what? This would be a great take of this first verse if this one hi-hat wasn't a little dragged. Well, let's move it back a little bit. Or let's move it forward, whatever. And then you move that and you're like, well, the snare after it kind of sounds weird because we moved that forward. Now the snare sounds like it's dragged, so we do that. Then you're like, well, you know what? Let's just look at the grid lines, the bar lines, and we'll just move them to that. Then you start cutting out, moving them. Then they give you this tool called Beat Detective. Then you can actually quantize an entire part. So then it becomes like a drum machine. So it's not human-like.
What he means by that, because there have been scientific studies showing, Rick's done a lot of videos about like the Spotify top 10, how everything's kind of similar, it sounds the same, it's very watered down, they don't do a lot of interesting chord changes anymore, very straightforward. This is just how they do it. Forgive the airplane, I live near an airport because I'm an idiot. So Rick's point is that to make music, you used to have to buy an instrument, learn how to play it, buy expensive equipment, learn how to use it, pay to go to a recording studio, pay engineers, pay producers, pay masters. There was all these things and an expensive price tag to it. And only people that were really dedicated to it did it. And there's truth to that. I came up in at the tail end of that, where like computers were starting to be used pretty regularly, but you still needed to go to a studio, things like that. And Rick's point is that, a couple years ago, Billie Eilish swept the Grammys with the top 4 categories, I believe it was, off of an album she made in her bedroom with her brother on a laptop. And that's impressive, but that also speaks to the level of talent that you're dealing with, because as the price of admission to anything lowers, you get more people involved, which is a good and bad thing. But in Rick's opinion, because you're not having to fork this money out, it allows more people to jump in. And then with the advent of auto-tune, you didn't have to be a great singer anymore. You could just dial the note up. With quantization, you could take a crappy drummer and put his shitty drumming right on the beat. You didn't even need to concern yourself with finding a quality player and paying them, and like you used to. And there's some validity to that. He's not wrong, I can tell you that. But at the same time, I think that there's also a problem with... I think that the more people involved is always good, because cream rises to the top. But you get a quantity over quality issue as well. The more people that are involved, the lower quality is going to go. And that's not true for everybody. That's not to say that everybody has, drops to that level. But at the same time, even talented people, I think, fall prey to... We live in a world with a 24-hour cycle now. Meaning that if you're going to be successful at social media, like, as I've seen, you have to be posting constantly. And to keep enough things going to post constantly, you need to be producing constantly. And that makes... There comes a time issue, because it decreases the amount of time you spend on something. It also makes things that normally you wouldn't want out, you wouldn't put out, slip through from time to time, because you're fatigued. You need to get this video out. You need to get this song written so you can clip it up, cut clips up and get it on TikTok and Instagram and, whatever. So I see his point there. Music being easy to make has opened the door to a lot of mediocre players. And that's fine, but the audience is the ultimate decider in that. And if the audience is going, if everything's being watered down, then those that take the time and spend the effort to use these tools to produce something of high quality stand out even more, in my opinion. Look at Ghost, look at Sleep Token especially. Like, these are guys that put out a masterpiece of an album. Tool is a representation of taking probably too long. So I see his point. He and I'm kind of all over the place because I'm trying to, touch points that he made. But, like, he makes the point of quantization. He shows a John Bonham rhythm where John's playing a shuffle and then they quantize it and he's, basically a robotic drum machine and it loses all feeling.
Here's an example of a quantized drum part. It's John Bonham's drum performance from Fool in the Rain that's a shuffle. Here's what it sounds like as a machine. Now here's the actual human performance of John Bonham. Notice the swing in it. Once you've quantized the drum part, it's a drum machine. It's just like Superior drums. So what started happening in the year 2000 or so is that everyone started quantizing their drums because the budgets to hire session guys like Josh Freese and Kenny Aronoff went away, and you'd have to use the crappy drummers. I mean, some bands would have good enough drummers to play, but you'd typically have these crappy drummers that you'd have to fix their parts. And once you fix their parts, you start moving the bass around, you start moving the guitars around, and then you pretty much have sterile, generic, quantized rock music that has no vibe at all.
And yes, that's true. That is certainly the case. And when you use these tools, it makes your music sterile. But at the same time, there are, for those that care about these things, it doesn't matter. If I want to shuffle on my album, I'll tell I'll get a drummer and tell him to play a shuffle. I'll play a shuffle. Like, I won't quantize, whatever. So to me, that argument is a 50-50 thing, yes. With more people being able to access getting in, it's going to water down the sauce. But at the same time, for those of us that put the effort in, I feel like it will shine through. And I think that's the thing that he's not talking about is, yes, there have been scientific studies showing that music's getting less and less and less complex and, very similar. Everything's becoming very similar. But that doesn't mean that the audience automatically is going to lean to that. There has to be something to why the audience is gravitating toward it. So I don't know that I fully... I agree with what he's saying in principle. I think it was better when there was a price to admission, but at the same time, I don't feel like music should be have any gatekeepers. I know how much it's enriched my life. I get to wake up every day now and live my dream to a degree, and I want everybody to enjoy music. That's why I work on my channel the way I do. I try to teach basics so that the people that are new coming in get started. He does make a point that, with the advancement of technology, there's some creativity lost because you're not encouraged to explore.
It's difficult to get a good guitar sound. You have to have a good sounding amp, you have to have good sounding speakers, good microphones that work well. Most people now just use amp modelers. They plug into their computer, they pull up their program, everything is done for them. They've already been pre-mic'd, pre-selected, they're all using the same algorithms. They can create great sounds. They're so easy to use. Doesn't take any skill at all, but it doesn't take any creativity either. Then, of course, you have the MIDI packs that you can buy if you can't play keyboards. So it'll just have pre-programmed chord progressions. Because for some reason, people can't just kind of space their fingers out and learn to play a few chords like that. Or maybe just experiment. What is this? What is this?
That I will go along with, but I would go along with it for a different reason. I think that people are overwhelmed. There's so much now. There's so many plugins. There's so many things you can do. It's hard to know how to do any of it, at a master level. There are people who do. Tim Henson of Polyphia, he's got recording down in his plugin. Rabia Massad's got his plugin figured out. He knows all the ins and outs. And he does amazing things with it. But if I'm buying that plugin, there's no way I'm going to know all the tricks that it can do. It's going to take forever to learn how to do that. And by that time, I'm going to buy 3 more plugins. Then I'm probably going to change recording software 2 or 3 times. And then I'm going to buy, a guitar that does something crazy or a drum set that's never been built before, So I think that musicians are overwhelmed. We're bombarded with too much. There was a time when, your guitar player would go buy a pedal or you'd go to the store and buy a cymbal, and it would change the way your band practiced for a week, if not longer. You would write songs just based on this new piece of equipment. And if you both did it at the same time, my God, you could get a double album. Like, you know, so I agree with, you know, his reasoning was like, you don't have to explore now because it's just at the touch of a button. And that's true. And I'm sure there are people that are that way. But I would go from the opposite direction, that I think people are overwhelmed and the choices are so many that they don't make any. And it doesn't encourage exploration. I think these companies that put this stuff out are trying to. They're trying to give you all the options so you will explore, but they've given you too many. You know, Costco and Sam's Club, things like that, when they became popular, one of their marketing strategies, and it still this way to this day, is you don't overwhelm the customer with choices. You know, if you go to Costco, you buy one type of ketchup, and it's a large thing of ketchup, but there's not 6. You go to the grocery store, there's 17 different ketchups, and that makes the consumer overwhelmed with choice, and then they don't make a choice. They just don't buy ketchup. You know, they go home and get the same thing they've always gotten. If you limit their choices, they can make choices easily, and they will. And that's been proven over and over and over. That's why your Costco, your big box Costco, Sam's Clubs don't have a lot of choices in any department. They want to narrow you down so you can make choices easily and move on. And they spend millions of dollars studying this, and they've found that if you give less choices, people will choose your product over and over and over because they don't have to think about it. People have enough to think about. They don't want to spend a bunch of time making choices. And I think in the music industry, I'm not saying this in a malicious way. I don't think that an amp company is doing you wrong by giving you, 800 different models in your amp modeling software or your amp model, whatever. I don't think they're doing anything wrong. I think they're genuinely coming from a place of like trying to help the consumer and give them as many choices as they want, so that they have everything at their fingertips. The problem is that I think it's gotten to a point where the equipment has become so complicated that you don't explore anymore. Whereas when when your guitar player would go buy a pedal, or your bass player would get a 5-string for the first time. Like, those things would spark exploration. So I see his point there. And I agree, but like I said, I think from a different direction. His second part is the part that is questionable. He says that music is too easy to consume.
Act 2. Music is too easy to consume. So this is the water faucet in my kitchen. But imagine this is streaming on Spotify or Apple Music. You can turn it on, you can turn it off, but what's going on in the stream of water is all of the music that's on these platforms. Now imagine this is one artist's entire output, their entire catalog. Might be The Police, could be Billie Eilish, could be Led Zeppelin, the Beatles. And then this dropper is each of their songs. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, I just did a whole record there. And eventually you exhaust their whole catalog. When I hit this and I start the stream, the music has very little importance if you think about it this way. It goes from the faucet, down the drain, out to the sewer, where it's recycled again.
And his point being that you used to have to save your money up, go to a store, buy a record. Then there was an effort put in. There was an investment in this thing. And so therefore, you treasured it. It held value to you because you had to work to get it. And he says that, with the advent of Spotify and things like that, that's what killed that. And I would disagree completely. Napster killed that. LimeWire killed that. When you could download any album for free, that's when that went away. And yes, now, like, yeah, you can pay $10 for the cost of one album. You can have every piece of music at your fingertips in the history of music. I agree with that. I see his point. I remember when 10,000 Days from Tool came out, I got the album, and I went to my friend's house, who was my writing partner for years. And he's my favorite person to play music with. He's my favorite person to write music with. We just get each other. And I went over and I brought the album over, and there was a bunch of people there. And I came in and said, holy shit, I got the new 10,000 Days from Tool. And I was excited, and he was excited. And everybody else just kind of dwindled out, like, well, we're going to go do something else. And I remember him sitting on the couch and me laying in the floor, and we listened to the entire album start to finish twice. And that was my investment. Like, I didn't care about the money spent. I cared about the time and the memories and the, oh my God, with my friends. And this is where I think Rick has missed the boat a little. Because he says that because of this, music has been devalued.
Except in this case, the music is not recycled like it is through the sewer. There were 100,000 new songs added every day in 2023 to streaming platforms. That's more than one song per second for the entire year. By comparison, when I was a kid, if I wanted to buy this Led Zeppelin II record, I had to get a job or borrow money from my parents to buy it because I wanted to own it. I wanted it to be in my collection. This album here, Pat Metheny, New Chautauqua, I paid $8 for, brand new, with the money that I made by bagging groceries at Tops grocery store in Fairport, New York. You actually had to expend energy riding your bike or walking to your job, working your shift, getting your paycheck at the end of the week, depositing it in the bank, getting money out, going to the record store, buying the record, bringing it home, playing it, listening to it a bunch of times, going over to your friend's house, sharing it with them. When a kid opens Spotify and clicks on a song, they can just skip to the next one if they don't.
And I get what he's saying, in that people don't have to put effort and money into music, therefore they don't value it. There's truth to that.
Which is why music is not as valued by young people. There is no sweat equity put into obtaining it, having it be part of your collection, having it be part of your identity of who you are. These are the bands I believe in. These are the artists that I love. And I'm going to share it with my friends. I'm going to bring that record to school. I'm going to play it for my friends after school. We're all hanging out, reading the back cover of it and seeing who played on it. These things meant something. What was on here meant something. Produced by John Burns and Genesis. It was important. What I'm saying is that music has basically become valueless. If you only have to pay $10.99 a month to have access to anything, what is one song worth?
As with anything, if you're a parent, you make your kids buy things, you make them save their money up so that they learn the value of a dollar, they learn what it takes to get things, and they value the things that they get. But Rick states in the video that music is devalued. It doesn't have value anymore to this generation, and I disagree. I have a daughter. I've watched her, when she lived with me full time, sit and listen to her favorite singers, Taylor Swift, Meghan Trainor, Lady Gaga, for hours on end, and those songs meant everything to her. If music was devalued in that way, and it was homogenized in that way, Taylor Swift her tour wouldn't break $1 billion. This generation values music. It's just they have so much of it. Over 100,000 songs were uploaded to streaming every day in 2023. Like, imagine that. That's insanity. So how do you weed through all of that to find something great? And that's where I think the record stores, that's where we're missing that. I miss going to a record store and just buying an album based on the album cover. Not knowing anything about the band, just these guys look cool, or this album looks cool, or the song titles sound cool, so let's get it and find out. And I discovered a lot of bands that way. But at the same time, I've discovered a lot of bands, flipping through YouTube suggestion. Sleep Token, one of my favorite bands. I discovered them that way. Ghosts, same thing. So, again, I agree to a point, but not with the devaluation. I understand what he means by about you not spending the money for the music, therefore it has no value. And there's something to that. But I think that the too easy to consume thing comes down to this. I think that my opinion on this whole thing is that a lot of this comes down to laziness and pressure. It's a fast-paced world now. You have to get music out. And I know myself personally in writing things, there have been arguments and disagreements with people I've wrote music with, where before we would have really drilled down on this and picked the song apart note by note to get it perfect before we would ever want somebody to hear it. But now you just want to get it out. You just want people to hear it and get it out there, and maybe you hit the wave and go for a ride. But at the same time, if you take your time, those that do spend the time and worry about their sound quality and things like that, they're going to rise to the top. Even now, they're going to stand out. I think that quantity has become the name of the game now, because the more you push out, we were averaging, before my surgery, we were averaging over 100,000 views a week on social media, easily. But to do that, I was having to post stuff constantly, and it was enough to be a full-time job for another human being, just to keep up. And so when you're having to do that to have any relevance, your quantity is going to go through the roof because it has to, but inversely your quality is going to go down. I think that lack of collaboration is also an issue, because you can sit in your room by yourself. And that's, for me, I've always enjoyed being in bands. I like the collaborative process. I like taking a riff in and the drummer doing something completely different than what I thought. That excites me. I like playing parts and watching people flip out. As I mentioned earlier, I had, my what you would call my writing partner for years. Ultimately, I stepped out to do my own album on my own because I wanted to try to see if I could do it. There's nothing against him, but I knew that if I do this with him, it's not going to be completely mine, because it's not fair for him to have no input, and I would want his input. But at the same time, I also wanted to venture out and play with other people that encouraged me, and pushed me in a positive way. Because you can run into these stale collaborations where, you forget to pump each other up. And it's always exciting when you're playing with new people and everybody's vibing. So when you're in a room by yourself, it becomes very hard to get those types of moments. You don't vibe. You do to yourself, but you don't have somebody going, well, wait a minute, try this. Or maybe this part should go here. You're having to trust your own instincts and your own writing process in the hopes that you're getting it right. But you don't, you never have somebody there going, well, try this, maybe this should go there, that should, So I think the lack of collaboration hurts music today. I also think that we consume music through means, when I was a teenager, like the coolest thing you could get that everybody wanted for their birthday was like a killer radio system, with some great speakers, like, and a stand-up, and it's like your first piece of furniture in your room, that you picked out type deal. Because music was going to be what you were doing. And like I said, my daughter was the same way, but she listened to all her music on her laptop or on her phone or off of her tablet. And the speaker quality has gotten better through the years, for sure. I'm not saying it hasn't, but it's not a full speaker setup. And we've become used to listening to music on low quality speakers. And if that's in fact the case, and you're cranking music out and everything's just homogenized, you're not going to spend a lot of time worrying about your sound quality. You're going to get it good and, and get it mastered, all that, but you're not going to devote a lot of time to getting things absolutely perfect, because it's going to be waste. It's going to be lost on your, and even now, bands, when Tool's last album came out, they talked about going out and checking the sound quality on the phone, on earbuds, in the car, So, low quality speakers, I think, have also lowered our expectations, because you don't hear a lot of the intricate things you normally would on a full setup. So, I think that's sent a message to the artist: don't bother. Like, we can't hear it anyway, and I'm not going to invest the money into, some big nice speaker system. So at best, I'll get a Bluetooth speaker, and then maybe I'll hear it. So I think that's encouraged artists to do less. Like, everything seems to me to point to, don't waste your time. You need to be in a hurry anyway. You got to crank this stuff out. And a lot of the minutia is going to get lost anyway, so don't do it. But I agree. Even if I'm coming at it from different angles, I agree a lot with what Rick says. I really do. I disagree wholeheartedly with that this generation has no value for music. I completely disagree with that. I think that's a disconnect between him and young audiences. That's all I can say to that. But let me know what you think. What did you think about Rick Beato? I'm going to link to his original video. Let me know what you think about his video. Go check it out. I would say I caution I caution anytime I hear a blanket statement. And the real reason music is getting worse, well, we have to start on the premise of, is music getting worse? Everything sounding the same doesn't necessarily mean worse. I was watching Get Back last night, the Beatles documentary, and there were a lot of stuff that, when they played certain songs back to back to back, started sounding exactly the same. But the Beatles packaged it in a way that split those songs up, got them away from each other, and it made, then they're all hits. But a lot of it, and this is from possibly the two greatest songwriters on the planet to ever live. They were geniuses. And they were. I'm in no way disputing that. So, we have to start with, do you agree that music is getting worse? Because yes, it's getting less intricate. Yes, songs are getting shorter. But we've seen this trend before. It's happened before. It will happen again. Music goes through these periods where it's up and down. So, A, do you believe music is getting worse? And, because I caution you against a blanket statement like that. And if you agree, why do you think it is? Leave in the comments below. Tell me why you think music is getting worse. Or is it not getting worse? Is music devalued completely? Does music hold no value to this generation? Do you agree or disagree with the points Rick made? Let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you got anything from my ramblings, leave, a like, comment, subscribe. That would help. Subscriptions always help tremendously. I know you all hear it all the time. I'm going to link him in the description below. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will see you next time on Polyrhythm Music LLC. Later.